Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Pat.
I'm Pat. I'm an alcoholic. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like today. And my story is no exception. What it used to be like was probably, in many respects, what it was like for you. I heard all kinds of stories after I came to AA about people talking about migrating over an imaginary line from normal drinking into alcoholism. My experience was that I was born on the wrong side of that line. I never experienced, from my very initiation into the world of alcoholism, genuine enjoyment of a great one after dinner. I just never experienced that. I wanted to, but never did. What I experienced instead was being 14, hanging around with 18-year-old guys who had 21-year-old ID. And they got several cases of beer. They shared them with me, as many as I could consume, and then I tried to beat up everything I couldn't throw up on. I don't remember any of that to this day. It was my first drunk, and it was my first blackout, and the two seemed to almost be hand in glove. Okay. We got this kid, he's waking up, he's 14 years old, he's on the floor of a pretty nice home in St. Petersburg, Florida. His Methodist mother is on the phone speaking in hushed tones in the room next door to a priest. Interesting combination. So Father Profeta came out to the house, he talks to my mother, she talks to him, and I'm no longer at St. Paul's School where I'd gone to play ball. I'm now on my way to St. Leo College Prep, up above Tampa, Florida, about 60 miles. 4 years of Latin, 2 years of Greek, perfect preparation for life in the 12th century. There wasn't a lot of drinking at St. Leo. As a matter of fact, there wasn't a lot of stuff at St. Leo. And they believed in caning. They caned the boys when they didn't do well. And sometimes they caned you when you didn't do well enough. And it was a constant, and it was a continuum of religious observances. And at that time, a lot of it was in a language that many of us don't speak. I have nightmares in that language, but many of us don't use and speak that language. And so I went on through school and graduated from school and got a job at the local music and news station announcing for when the guys would need a break and they need somebody to do the news, I was the kid that would do the news. And then I had a Saturday morning program, and it looked like I was going to maybe amount to something. It was going to be okay. But I was 1A draft status. So we had to kind of examine that. And everybody I talked to told me, you're going nowhere. You're going into the military. That's where you're going. So I made a sensible decision and picked the branch of service I wanted to be part of. Naturally, that was the most rigorous, coming from where I came from, and that was the United States Marine Corps. So there I was in Paris Island, getting smacked around and beat up and cursed at, and learning how to be a Marine. And then went to Camp Lejeune and watched some artillery being fired off and saw what happened to the trees that it landed on, and decided immediately I needed to get in the air wing as quickly as I could. So I did, and was sent to Jacksonville, Florida. Bear in mind, part of this was to travel, have adventure, see the world, and I hadn't been 500 miles from home. I'm now in Jacksonville, Florida, and there were posters on the base indicating that, you know, if you were enlisted and you showed the right stuff, that you could get into Naval Aviation Cadets and become a pilot. I was naive enough to believe those posters. And I went into the Information and Education Office, took a bunch of tests, took a physical, and wound up being given orders and sent to Pensacola, Florida to become a pilot. I was 19 years old when I took my first solo. And when I came back from my second solo, the first one's where the instructor pats you on the head and sends you around for a few touch and goes. The second one's the real deal, where you pre-flight your aircraft, taxi it out and take it off. When I'm coming back and letting down into the pattern, I see something really bizarre, which is an airplane trying to take off and not succeeding and crashing and burning. And I circled it. I yelled, crash, crash, crash at the end of the duty runway, and watched my navigation instructor and a individual in the back seat burn to death. And that was my initiation into naval aviation, okay? And so I did expose myself and did see people not constantly dying. I'm not saying that wings are falling off and people, but I saw this was not civil aviation, okay? And that's all we can say about that. It was at times terrifying. Hours and hours and hours of sheer boredom, punctuated by intermittent moments of stark terror. And I was really afraid at times, but I rediscovered alcohol, and that helped me a great deal. It really did. It helped me get through. And there were a lot of other people discovering alcohol about the same time and getting through and being real studs and drinking a lot and the things that go on when you're really something. And so that was my experience when I got out of flight training and came out to my permanent duty station in California. I just had a terrible time. I was drinking all the time. It was, you know, and blacking out. And it was, I think that if I'd have wound up staying in the Marine Corps as a career until I was 60, I would have been the world's oldest living first lieutenant. That was not the case. And so at the age of not quite 23, I was given my honorable separation. I mean, we parted company and friends. I'd had a great experience. My skipper and I really got along, and we liked each other at the end. But I still was afflicted by this terrible, I was just trying to deal with this monster, this, you know, where I would drink and I would black out. I mean, that was, and I'd wake up and it would just be, like, where have I been? What have I done? And it would be very Kafkaesque. Because of the religious background, the religious experience, I found prayer really helped. And I would go to the rear bumper of my car after I'd been out there driving on the freeway 100 miles an hour, trying to see if I got enough airspeed to get, you know, airborne. And I would pray, and I would beg God to get me to the front of the car where I would not find some humanoid dent or hair or blood or something that was evidence that I had hit somebody and obviously killed him, right, and done a hit and run. That was one of my terrors. And so I would crawl up to where the door was, and I would kneel and I would pray some more at the door. And I would get to the front of the automobile, and I would thank God that there were no humanesque or humanoid dents. There was no blood, there was no hair, there was no nothing. And I would promise God that I would never drink again as long as I lived. But unfortunately, I outlived my promises. And I did that on a repeated basis. Toward the end of my Marine Corps experience, my best friend was killed in a horrific crash. And I went out to be with his wife. She was 5 months pregnant. They had 2 little girls. And I was asked to go, because of her circumstances, identify my friend. We were test pilots. I don't mean that we were like Scott Crossfield type test pilots. We would, you know, the guy, when you have your car repaired and after it's all fixed, he drives it around and makes sure that, you know, I was that kind of, you know, a maintenance test pilot. Let's don't carry it away here, okay? But he and I, for our Marine Air group, would take the aircraft up and see that they were working right before we turn them back over to the fleet. And he asked me, because this one there was a rigging problem. It kept flying along in a crab. We were recon helicopter pilots. And he asked me to go up with him, and I said I was busy and couldn't, but would at 1,400 hours. That's 2 o'clock to us. And quite frankly, I had a card game, and I'd promised these guys, because I'd gotten into them pretty good, that I would I'd go up at noon and give them a chance to get me. And the horns went off all over the base, and it was him out there dying, you know, and then it was his wife, and then it was back in this really hushed, darkened room, and him in pieces, and me being 22, I think it was, you know, just to really kind of, I look back a baby. I mean, I got kids now in their 30s, and it was kind of the capper for me. I mean, you know, it was very, very, it was, you know, I took his body back to Arlington, met his mother and father. They asked me what condition he was in. I lied to them and would lie to them today and told them he looked just surprisingly fine, but that all military funerals were closed casket. And went through the experience. It was something that apparently really affected me. I didn't really want to be in the Marine Corps anymore. I served out the rest of my experience and went to college. And the drinking continued and persisted, and I came back to Los Angeles and knew that I dare not really keep this up, that I was really destroying everything. I wanted to be an attorney. I knew this wouldn't be possible the way I was going. The grades were good. Everything was going along fine. You know, here we have this kid. I mean, he's doing okay in high school. He's an athlete, and he's getting prizes and things for things. In the service, he starts out as a private, and he winds up getting wings, and he's a pilot. Well, what's wrong here? What's going on? This guy's like just a mess, because there are these intervals of complete confusion and chaos and madness. And so I decided it was alcohol. I decided it must be the booze. And I called information and asked for Alcoholics Anonymous. And they told me the number, and I dialed it. And 2 nice middle-aged gentlemen in a Buick Electra drove up and took me to my first AA meeting at a place called the Hole in the Ground over in Huntington Park. It was a very impressive situation. I look out and see all these really beautiful faces, good-looking, healthy people, really all around me. And the Hole in the Ground wasn't like that at all. The Hole in the Ground was total walking wounded, wall to wall. People claiming to be in their 40s and looking like they were well into their 60s and looking like they were probably right out of an intensive care unit. You know, everybody was just flushed with pink lace all over their face, their livers begging for mercy. Stories that would absolutely just curdle everything, all your bodily fluids. You're sitting there listening to this, and these people tell these horrific stories of getting married after meeting somebody in the nut house and then divorcing them and then going back to the nut house and finding somebody that was better and marrying them, you know. I'm 25. I'm 25. I'm doing really okay in school. I think I'm pretty bright. As a matter of fact, I was reasonably bright, but I don't know about smart. And I was just sitting there taking all this in, and I made a decision, my first AA meeting. And here it is. If by any chance I were to drink again and continue doing what I was doing, I was going to die young. That was for sure, okay? I was really, really rolling the dice, playing Russian roulette, and I was going to die young, all right? On the other hand, if I didn't stop drinking on my own and quit now, I'd wind up in these damn meetings with all of these really disturbing people. And I don't, so in fear of winding up in AA, I quit. I quit right on the spot. Guys called me. I said, thanks a million. I thank you very much for taking me, but I'm okay now. And I quit drinking. And I stayed stopped for the better part of 3 years. And it wasn't until I got divorced and couldn't pay my law school tuition, and all these reasons started cropping up that were really kind of like Custer looking outside his tent that morning and saying, why isn't even one of them smiling, you know? I knew I was screwed, okay? And I needed somebody to talk to. I've been sober quite a while, but it wasn't working. And I needed somebody who understood. And I found that person at the Blarney Castle on Western Avenue, just north of Wilshire Boulevard. And I bought him the first drink. And he understood. And I took the first one with him. And everybody understood. And I blacked out again. And I woke up again. And I was in the felony situation. The difference between the felony situation and the misdemeanor situation, there are probably some attorneys in the group and I can explain it to you. I have my own explanation. That probably not going to hold up in court, but here it is. Misdemeanor situation is you're in the tank. You're in a congregate living style. You're with a group, all right? On the other hand, the felony situation, depending on how serious and dire the felony is, you're isolated. And to the extent that the felony is severe, you are under scrutiny. And there I was across the aisle from the guy running the jail, that little window they have where they count the people and everything. There he was, right across from me, in a cell all by myself with nothing in that cell but me. Nothing to sit on, nothing else. And I knew I'd committed a felony and a blackout, and it was over. So I made the second major mistake I'd made in my drinking experience. I walked up to the bars and looked through them straight at this guy, and I told him I was a law student, I knew my rights, and that he needed to inform me of the charges against me. He kept counting the cards and looking at the things he was doing and ignoring me. He did a great job of ignoring me. And I found that by raising my voice, I got nowhere. And then finally he said, if you sit down and shut up, just sit on the floor. Sit on the floor. Sit on the floor. Okay. I'll tell you what you're in here for as soon as I get through here. So we got through there. And he explained to me that the night before, a couple of young guys in a black and white cruiser were driving around the streets of Los Angeles trying to protect and serve. And they saw a guy, that was me, walking with one foot in the gutter and one foot on the curb, talking to himself. Turned very smartly and walked straight into a building on the other side of the sidewalk, then came back, sat down on the curb, and was pounding his head with both fists. They decided to take me into custody, and they did. And they put me in the drunk tank, as was their custom. But I was so obnoxious, so disgusting, and so disturbing that the drunks got together in the drunk tank and asked them, please, take this SOB out of here. Get him out of here. So on my first time out, drinking after almost 3 years of sobriety, I was 86th out of the drunk tank in the Hollywood jail. I didn't learn from that. I wish I could tell you I learned from that. What I did was decide to move. I decided to change. I wasn't going to be able to go through law school now, so I just kept on going. The geographic. I decided instead to try my fortune at the beach. I'd grown up on the beach in Florida. Well, I would go out to the beach, and I got out to the beach. And I got a real estate license. And in spite of myself, I sold a piece of real estate. I'm still shocked. I still look back with a degree of, how did this happen? I sold a piece of real estate, collected the commission, and went fishing one afternoon for 3 days. Put $100 in my pocket, which would really go somewhere during those times, and went fishing out on the Hermosa Pier. And at the end of this period of time, when I was sleeping on the bench and buying croaker sacks from the bait shop and the whole works and putting these fish, the fish started to look more and more like fish I'd seen in the National Geographic. Really down deep and weird and prehistoric. But I just stayed out there and fished until it was fished out for me. And a friend of mine had come out and talked to me, and he said to me that he tried AA and it hadn't worked for him, but maybe it worked for me. He says, you know, you really are in trouble, man. And I said, I know I am. And there I stood after 3 days at the base of the Hollywood Pier, convinced that if I ever took a drink of alcohol again, that I would die. And that I could not quit on my own. I was convinced of that, and that I was doomed. I was between the dog and the hydrant. I went into AA. I went into the Alano Club of the South Bay in Manhattan Beach, turned myself in, and began to attend meetings. And things started working better. And I certainly realized maybe I was going to be okay. So I would go to the meetings, and I would then go out to meetings in the Valley, and I heard some really smart people in the Valley. So I'd come back to the meetings in Manhattan Beach and say some of the smart things that I'd heard in the Valley. And pretty soon I was getting a lot of respect in Manhattan Beach. So shuttle diplomacy, I would run back and forth, and I thought, this is where you get in there and you network, and and I was starting to really make some progress. I would listen to them read the steps at these meetings, and I thought that that would be a pretty good deal when I got, my recovery. And of course, my recovery came first. I needed new pants. I needed new shirts. I needed a new car. It would be nice to have a new girlfriend, and terrific to have another place to live. And by the way, it'd be really great to get caught up on the child support. That would be good. And it would be really good to, some of these days, stop smoking. That would be good. So once I got recovered, then I could start working the steps. So I wanted to do it right. So you want to do it when you're messed up. You want to do it right. So I kept listening to the steps and realizing that one of these days I was going to have to do them. But I also realized that a lot of these people in these rooms were not carrier qualified, and therefore I was a notable exception. Once you've landed an airplane on a boat, it goes right to your head and start believing stuff about yourself that just ain't so, okay? And I'm just like believing this stuff about myself and going down to Sherman Oaks and listening, and there were really great people out there, and they were pretty funny. I'd come back and say some of the funny stuff at Manhattan Beach, and then I started experiencing anxiety attacks. I started experiencing free-floating episodes and moments of anxiety.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
I decided we'll cope with this, because I had a new car then. We'll take the new car down to the airport, and we will drive it under that, because I was really scared to go under the runway at the airport, and that was really a terror place. And we'll drive through there, and we'll go like this, and we'll drive through there, and then we'll turn the car around, and we'll go back through, and we'll do it as many times as we have to do it until we burn it out of our system. The fear, we're going to burn it out. So I tried burning it out, and it would be pretty awful, and I would normally have to sleep a lot after I'd done this, because it was really, really tough to do, and I didn't realize that I was a mess, and that maybe, I learned a lot later that maybe I had some PTSD, but I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about that. I just figured, I'll do this. This is my instinct. I'm going to do it. Things are working out better. I have a new car, I have new pants, and I have a new place to live, and I have a new girlfriend. And we'll handle this one way or another. And surrender. These people kept talking about, God almighty, they kept talking about surrender. And I'm saying, what the hell? I have no part. No, thank you. Absolutely not. No, that's disgusting. And the whole idea of surrendering is just plain revolting. We're going to drive this car under this tunnel until we get it right. So there I was one day, and the shakes coming down real bad, and scared to drive the car over to the Alano Club of the South Bay, where I know I could find peace. And I was looking in the phone book for some help, okay? And I realized this. I realized I'd come to this point. I realized I was powerless over alcohol and I was down at the end of the pier. And I was convinced after a couple of really tough, diligent years that my life had become unmanageable. Now I knew that. I internalized it and understood it at a molecular level. My life was unmanageable. There's no doubt about it. So I decided to go find some help because I realized it would take a power greater than me to restore me to sanity. And I decided to look up the California Department of Mental Health in the white pages and get that power greater than myself working in my life and get some help. I had this fantasy. It was kind of like there was a Mount Vernon on a hill somewhere where the Department of Mental Health would take me and put me out on a gravel road on a bench by the side of the road, and I would kind of smile and wave at people as they'd come and go. That was my fantasy, and everything would be calm, and the stress would go away. It would leave. I'd feel better, and I thought the Department of Mental Health has these facilities for people like me, and maybe that's what I need to do is call them. And suddenly, as I caught myself thumbing through the white pages of the telephone directory looking for the California Department of Mental Health, I realized it's really true, man. You really do believe that a power greater than yourself is the only way you're going to get restored to sanity, and that you are unsane. Now, I don't know about insane, that's a legal term, but I know you are not sane. You're not, remember the Latin sana, sound of sound? You're not sound, Pat. You're not, man. It's not working. It's not working. But something's kept you alive. Something got you here. Something kept you alive, despite your best efforts to kill yourself. Besides all these crazy times when you were totally vulnerable and doing these insane, nutty things, you were sustained. You got to live. You got to live past it. Your friend, he died. You got to live. You walked away from that grave at Arlington. You wonder, why am I the one that's alive? Why is that one? What am I picked for? What's the purpose that I'm here for? Why this guy was wonderful. And oh man, why am I the one who survived? I have no idea. I have no idea. But I made a decision right there to turn my life and my will over that which I could not describe to you from this moment forward, that has sustained me despite my own best efforts to destroy myself. From there on, I would call that God. I would not argue or contest the things I'd learned at the school I'd been to. I would not have a fight with them. I was through fighting everything and everybody. But for me, my private feeling was something had really worked when I wasn't working, all right? I would call that God. And I went to the Alano Club of the South Bay, which is kind of where all the alcoholics would get together there in Manhattan Beach. And I ran into a guy who I'd seen around there. He was kind of a, beachcomber type guy in shorts, drinking coffee, kind of a ne'er-do-well. And he says, God, man, nice looking suit. I said, thank you very much. He said, good tie. I said, thank you. He says, you look like you just saw a ghost, if you don't mind my saying so. I said, well, I've been through something here. I don't know what it is, but I've really been through something. He says, and I swear to you, and I'm standing here before you, I'm not making this up for effect. He said, had you ever thought about working the fourth step? I said, yeah, I thought about it. I thought about it quite a few times, and I discussed it with friends, but I just hadn't done it yet. Would you like to do that? I said, yes, I'd like to do it. And so without making a long story even longer, I did it. I sat down and wrote it all down. And then he took me to somebody else. Interesting man. He didn't feel like he was the all, He took me to somebody else, and I sat down in front of that somebody else, and I read to that person and talked with that person and felt a great weight lifted. And what did I really want then? What did I really want? What was God's will for me? What power did I need to carry God's will out? I'd been really doing well in my business, working hard. And I went out and made amends, and I wanted a family. I wanted to have a business. I wanted very ordinary stuff. That's what I really wanted. So I had a business and I had a family. And I was in a nice town that was getting bigger and better and more, I'd gone to a sleepy beach town, and it was becoming really quite something. And we had children, my wife and I. And these children were growing up, doing their thing, developing. We discovered that, first as a boy and then a girl, that the young girl was deaf, that she was profoundly deaf. And the young boy wasn't doing well in preschool, so we didn't know what to do about that. We tried for a while to talk to the people that owned the preschool, but it was better that we took him out. And they asked us to take him out of the school because he wasn't adjusting, so we put him in a different school. And then we moved to a bigger house, BBD, a bigger and better deal. We had a nicer house now that we lived in. We had 2 Mercedes in the garage, and we had pink slips on the Mercedes, and thriving business, and everything was going along fine. When we moved to the new house, I was very puzzled that our boy, who was now, 5, 6 years old, just starting in grammar school, would go out in the street. He'd gotten along great in the other neighborhood, and these kids would come out of their houses and start hammering on him and whacking him around. For what? What had he done? My daughter from the prior marriage came out to visit us and stay with us, and she got next to one of the teenagers in the neighborhood and learned that he was a marked man, that he'd been stigmatized in the neighborhood, and that parents had been told not to let him play with their kids. See, he'd been kicked out of the McMartin preschool, the finest school on the planet, the premier school that everybody fought like hell to get their kid into, with a wait list halfway around the block, and he's the only one that we could identify that had been kicked out. He'd been expelled, and he had been expelled because he hadn't cooperated with the teachers. As a matter of fact, he'd bitten one. So that made him incorrigible as well as a pariah. Don't let your kids play with him. So they didn't, and the kids were responding as the kids will respond. It was Lord of the Flies time. A little bit later, he suddenly became this stellar hero. It's amazing how things can change, and I can tell you, if you're new in AA, things can change for you in drastic ways, but it's important to, I think, recognize that that if you want things to change for you, then you're the one that's got to change. That's the one piece of advice I'll give you. You're the one that's got to change. Other people will change all around you, but if you want things to change for you, you're the one that's got to change. And no matter what the people do or what they say, the only one you can really count on is the one that sustains you despite your best efforts to destroy yourself. And that one I choose to call my higher power. You can define your higher power however you feel like it. It's all right with me. But what happened was just plain bizarre. We're living in this house. We got, really tiny little mortgage with payments that, we could have paid it off. Money in the bank, the whole works. And suddenly we discovered with this daughter, who was now 3 years old, that she had juvenile onset diabetes. So now we have a son that's pariah, and we have a daughter with diabetes, and we have another little girl who's just a beautiful little girl, and she hasn't got any problems. And I look back and wonder, maybe she felt that survivor's guilt of walking away from Arlington and feeling like, why was I the one? Why was I the one who was spared, Maybe she had to live with some of that. So raising these children and having this family was a bit of a challenge. Then all the terrible news came out about this school, just like it's coming out again And of course, there are people who believe and disbelieve, and I can only get you to agree with me about one thing, if nothing else. It was a mess. You don't have to believe anything about this that you don't feel like believing, as far as I'm concerned, because I can understand if you watched the news and went through the thing, you didn't have to live with it and weren't in the middle of it. So let's all agree it was a mess. And it was a hell of a mess to be in the middle of, trying to raise a child and trying to deal with a daughter who was now experiencing all kinds of wild, brittle blood sugar experiences, including seizures. And now the paramedics are coming over to the house all the time. And then the insurance plan that we bought canceled us. And we got $150,000, $100,000 a year medical bills. Remember, 1 year with the income tax, we had 22 different care providers that we had seen for one reason or another over this child. And so we kept on keeping on. And it took its toll. And we were divorced. We refinanced the house to pay for things. Things happened that were bad. We lost more money. Had to sell the big house. She couldn't take it anymore. Filed for divorce. Got a van, packed everything up, went to Oregon, where, after a period of time, our son graduated from medical school. Our young daughter woke up one morning, saw all kinds of bizarre visual effects, and this was the beginning of a life leading to blindness as well as deafness. So we went back and forth to Helen Keller National Center in Long Island with her. She lived there. We did all we could, and we are doing all we can to help her today. So I'm still showing up for work. I'm 75 years old. I've been sober 45 years. I lost everything. Everything that we think of losing everything, but I did not lose my sobriety, so I did not lose everything. I did not lose my higher power, so I did not lose everything. I lost a great deal of my ego, and I had a great deal of ego to lose, and I don't miss it. And now today, I practice the steps as best I can. That's my experience. You'll have to decide about my strength. Let me tell you very briefly about my hope. Is my hope that I can lose some of this weight. The place I went when in my grief and in my desolation and all the other crap was the fork. I went to the fork, and I ate too much. I got it down to 185, would you believe it? And now I've taken it back up to a number I will not share with you today. But I'm hoping that you will join me in praying for me that I, at the age of 75, can recognize I'm powerless over a lot of stuff and that I need to say grace before every meal and bless the food so I do not do a lot of stupid crap that kills me because my daughter needs me. I mean, you know, she's getting a lot of help, but I got a private pay for the psychologist. I got a private pay to have her relatives flown up so she has a declining vision. And so what we've been doing is running back and forth with people so she can see them for the last time. So you have no idea how important Alcoholics Anonymous is to me. Maybe you have a better idea than you did when we started talking about this, but it really matters to me. I am really appreciative that you've been so kind and so attentive. I asked your secretary how long they wanted me to speak, and he said, you speak just as long as you like, but we're all leaving at noon. because I need it, my 11th step, I have a prayer practice. I don't read it cover to cover every day, but I do read pieces of it every day. And I share it with you to the extent it will help you and you can find it useful. So I'll leave it up here so you can look at it. If you want to take pictures of it or whatever you want to do, just don't snitch it, please. It took me a while to make it. You know, you guys have been a great group and you've been very kind. I want to thank you so much for your sobriety and for the time you spent with me today. You've been very polite. Thank you very much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.